I'm really, really glad that my mom is not here tonight because she taught me to be polite, and I'm starting with a really impolite question, which is, do you want your film to matter? Even worse than impolite, it's kind of illogical because the answer is obviously yes. And worst of all, it's coming from probably the only person in the room who has no claim whatsoever to being a visual storyteller. I mean, I'm absolutely not that guy. I am a nerdy guy who 25 years ago discovered his nerdy skill and said, wow, this is great, except I'm doing it to help this corporation add, $1 more million to its bottom line, which is cool because they pay me, but not so cool because there's never going to be a shortage of guys just like me who will take this job. So why do I matter? So I immediately did what I do to solve all problems and told my wife about it, who was unemployed at the time. This is good politics, right? You go and say, hey, honey, I know you just lost your job and stuff, but I'm really bored with mine. So she goes looking for a job for her, finds me a job at the coolest think tank in the world, which solves, or attempts to solve, the biggest problems facing the US government, and needs a nerdy guy just like me. So I'm in heaven, right? I'm sitting there, I'm doing this stuff, and after about 10 years of that, I figure out, the government isn't the only thing that attacks big problems. The web was coming along, technology looked important, so I jumped in there. A bunch of things happened, but I've now done 25 years of just taking whatever gig I can find that needs a nerd like me and that looks like it's trying to make a dent on a serious problem. So that's the perspective I bring to all this. And the punchline of my story is, everybody here who has anything to do with visual storytelling, dreaming it up, making it, publicizing it, financing it, anything, you guys have more leverage than probably anybody else on the biggest problems in the world. And I have one tiny credential to be able to say that, and the reason I have these strong opinions, because since we founded Maps Lab, I have been working with a legitimate digital storyteller. Let's see if this works. So the short young man on the right, 25 years ago, was a photographer who, like many people, had moved to Utah, decided to brave the Mormons because he loved skiing. 15 years later, I hired him to do a gig at a charity that I was running, and he did great on the gig, incredibly creative, pissed everybody off, but man, was it totally worth it. But in the process, I learned about this part of his life. That's 25 years ago, early days of Sundance. He's talking to a guy who helped him in that's Alan Alda, who was an icon for my generation. And if you ever, sidebar, if you ever doubt the power of digital storytelling, this was back in the day when TV meant a lot more than it means. But right after the Vietnam War, that show, good or bad, made it possible for Americans in my cranky Bible Belt Republican part of the country to actually think about whether you could always trust the government and actually maybe think that those crazy liberals who'd been marching were okay. So anyway, John gets Alan Alda and the President of the United States and 800,000 teachers taking Polaroid cameras into classrooms and learning a lesson that you guys probably all already know, which is once you give somebody a tool with which they can tell their story and maybe this much training to use it, you kind of can't put that genie back in the bottle. And it turns out when you do it in classrooms, really cool stuff happens. Now, I'm not here to pitch our company. That's the last thing I'm going to say about it. But I will say that 25 years later, John's still doing the same thing. It's not Polaroid cameras, it's an interactive mapping program. This was made by a 4th grader going to one of the certifiably worst schools in the United States, just on the edge of the Navajo Reservation in southern Utah. The kid is showing us that this is the route he has to drive or walk to get to the school bus stop. This is what it's like sitting there waiting. This would never make it on YouTube. Remember, 4th grader, almost no training, crappy digital camera, and most important of all, this is the kid whose desk gets turned against the wall because he's behaving so badly. He's reading at a 2nd grade level, he can't do math, and all of a sudden his teachers, who I have met, realize that there's talent in this kid, and in the other 19 or 29 or however many kids there were in that classroom. So that's the kind of stuff that John does. He's been doing this visual storytelling, trying to fix education for a long time. I get sucked in because, as I said, I care about change. And I won't bore you with the list. I will just show you things you already know. You can make a case that the world is about to explode. If you show that to people at a military think tank, they start talking about civil disorder, social instability, and all kinds of other scary stuff. People in this room look at it, and maybe, me on my good days, see the potential for transformation into a world much better than any that any of us have ever lived in or known about. But that doesn't happen by itself, right? We gotta make the change happen. So that's the perspective I'm coming to you from. This is an example of the
I want to be a nurse. I want to be a doctor.
How come?
Because I would like to help somebody in need.
You wake up every morning and you know that kids are getting a really crappy education right now.
So you think that most of the kids here are getting a crappy education right now?
Oh, I don't think they are. I know they are.
Either the kids are getting stupider every year, or something is wrong in the education system.
I just try to do my best at school and make my grandmother proud.
Among 30 developed countries, we rank 25th in math and 21st in science. In almost every category, we've fallen behind, except one. Kids from the USA rank #1 in confidence.
Now, let's just pause there and think about the good and the bad of this. The good is it does what good visual storytelling always does. It can take things that you already know, like there wasn't any significant idea in that we didn't all know 20 years ago or whenever you started paying attention. But it makes all that so vivid that we can't ignore it anymore. So that film, which was called Waiting for Superman, was a big splash. It had 1.5 million YouTube hits. This is 5 years ago on a boring documentary about education. It had all kinds of media play. It did what seemed to be all the right stuff. Now we're getting to the bad part. Connecting, the idea is always turn the movie into a movement, right? So they gave you ways to take action. If you could read the fine print, what you'd see it boils down to is you can get on our mailing list, you can sign a petition, you can send us money, you can read our book. Now, I'm not meaning to sound as much like a jerk as I'm sounding. They were doing the very best they could. But one of the things that happens when you hang around the change the world space for a long time is stuff that used to excite you, like the next greatest book on how to fix the school system or how to end world poverty or whatever. It goes from an exciting thing to a kind of a devastating thing because you've seen 30 books before and it doesn't matter how good this one is. Something's broken. The problems that really bother us, the old solutions aren't going to fix. And I know I don't have to sell that idea here. What I do want to sell is that we can do a lot more with visual media. So that's actually their current webpage listing the stuff. If you were able to read it, you would see. They'll tell you how many people have been involved. They'll tell you how many signatures they got. They don't tell you how much money, but even it doesn't matter. If it was $1 billion, I think we spend $500 million a year on no, it's $50 billion a year on the US public school system. So it's not gonna make a difference. This is not the answer. Now, you guys all know that. We've been talking about community all along, but let's look at the old model. The old model is you want change, you're talking to individuals, so you say, okay, the institutions are what has to change. The school systems, the teachers' colleges, somebody with an organization somewhere, with an org chart and a budget and a bunch of rules has to change what they're doing or the schools don't get any better. So obviously you get individuals excited up, say go forth, take your pitchforks and your torches and make Congress fix it or make the president fix it or make your local school board fix it. That doesn't work. We all know, the missing element is communities, right? Now here's where I get to be even a little bit more obnoxious. One of the things that I learned in working with fantastic ninja people in 5 different countries who know how to take the poorest village in the world, turn the key, and make economic growth happen for years and years without us there to prop it up. What I learned from those people is over and over the word community. And I grew up in a little town, I've lived on an island, I've worked at places where nobody ever leaves, I've been in communities, but I think I'm a pretty typical North American of my generation in that we don't really have a sense of community. The generation that's now beginning to take over and to dominate our culture is spreading the idea of community. I don't think we understand it as well as we should. So when we're thinking about change, that's definitely the flow. And in other words, emotion in the individual, something happens in the community, the institutions change. The sort of bonus prize at the end when you get the system working right is there's a feedback loop. There's a whole bunch of theory that goes behind this. But we are on the right track when we talk about community. Where we're not on the right track is the current state of the art. This film, which is fantastic, is screening at Tribeca today.
Schools into bits of time, into 40 or 50-minute blocks typically, and then we ring bells and people start to shuffle around the building and do something else. That's an organizational device, it's not an educational principle.
10 university heads in 1890 said, in 11th grade, everyone should learn chemistry. In senior year, everyone should learn physics. A lot of these subjects are great, but these priorities were dictated 124 years ago.
The old blue-collar industrial model of education is already gone. We're already living in its wake.
What happens to society when hundreds of millions of people have that aimless, rudderless feeling of, I've been replaced by a very small box? I don't know if there's a solution.
We all learn in different ways. This isn't the way to do it, this is the way that I did it.
If the assignment is you get it back and you crumple it up and throw it in the trash can, that's kind of one student experience. And if the assignment is to produce something that you're going to present to professionals in the field, that's completely changing the whole dynamic.
We are trying to have that type of perplexity and curiosity get inculcated in our students.
Saying your parents, all your friends' parents, and a bunch of people you don't know are gonna be here to see the work you did. It creates an aspect of authenticity, because we are creating something for an audience.
The things I think in life that give us some of the greatest satisfaction is making something that wasn't there before.
And I can't wait for that moment when it does work and I'm completely done with it. And it's like all leaves. It'll be one of the greatest moments in my life.
When kids have that feeling, it's transformative for them. I made this, and everyone's coming to look at it.
So I'm not a professional. I'm a guy who buys a lot of movie tickets. That's a freaking great trailer, right? And as a change the world guy, I mean, if somebody gave you the keys to a school and said do whatever you want, and all you had was that 2 minutes, you'd do a much better job than any school that I've ever had my kids in, including ones that cost a lot of money. There's so much in there I could unpack it all night. And I saw that, and I'm thinking, okay, time to get my heart broken one more time. Because what's going to happen now? Everybody's going to see it at Tribeca. It's going to win all the awards. 5 million people will see it or something, a third of, 1.5% of the US population, and then the schools will still suck, right? But then I went to their webpage. They've expanded. This is different people, of course. This is not a book. This is TED Talks. This is stuff you can bop to right away. Most important, there's an opportunity to sign up and engage with people who, if the promise is upheld, will help you figure out how to work with your local school or whatever your educational community is. So this is absolutely positively the way forward. I am here to tell you, you guys can do better. And I think you have to.
How my parents came to America.
Cool. How many points do you think it's going to be?
Well, I wrote everything down, so that would be for my dad alone is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 to get to Utah.
Wow. So you think that's going to be pretty cool?
Yeah.
And that's what.
I'm really excited because I get to talk about all my favorite books.
That's what excited 4th or 5th or 6th graders look like. That's the kind of stuff they can produce after not too much training. That happens to be from our startup, but I know of probably 6 things you could bring into a school that would change it. The missing link and the thing you need to think about if you're the person who conceived or made or funded or distributed or publicized the film is, how do you fill that last kind of mile from I've seen the movie, I want to go make excitement like that happen, I want to make that standard in my kid's classroom. How do you get that filled in? And this is the part where I've cringed a few times over the course of these days here, because I hear what I hear at other enlightened gatherings, which is people talking about community and saying, I'd like to manage my community, or talking about my community. We even do that inside the organizations that I'm part of. And I can tell you from working with the kind of villages, tribes, and clans in Kenya, which is where I learned what I know about community, that you can't manage a community. They are fundamentally unmanageable. You cannot own a community. What you can get out of community is all kinds of transformative power. They will do stuff that you could not afford to buy. They will bring political power that will change things that you cannot change any other way. They are a source of ideas. I mean, you know all this. But the thing to do is find the community that's stuck with the problem in the place that you need to work it, and ask yourself one question. Not what can they do for my film? How can they drive attendance or whatever? But how can my film empower the right communities, the ones who can fix the problem? That's my shtick.